Hello everybody, my name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today we'll be returning to the subject of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, and we'll be talking about why the Second Amendment is on trial. So if you've been following the trial at all and you are a reasonable, rational person, you know it's not going well for the prosecution. And before they rested their case, they trotted out particularly two eyewitnesses that undermined and torpedoed their entire case. So let's roll their clips. We're going to start with the Daily Caller reporter. I believe it was the Daily Caller reporter, who was an eyewitness on the scene of the Rosenbaum killing. And then we're going to go to the guy with a hard name to pronounce, who was the survivor. I'll call him Biceps, because biceps. So let's roll tape.
And you've already established that after the shooting, Mr. Rosenbaum never says a word, correct?
Correct.
You don't know, as you sit here today, what Mr. Rosenbaum was thinking, do you?
You mean at the time of the shooting?
Yes. Or at any point in his life. I mean, you have no idea what Mr. Rosenbaum was ever thinking at any point in his life. You have never been inside his head. You never met him before. You don't know.
I've never exchanged words with him, if that's what your question is.
So your interpretation of what he was trying to do or what he was intending to do or anything along those lines is complete guesswork, isn't it?
Well, he said, "Fuck you," and then he reached for the weapon.
Okay. Let's talk about that. At that very moment,
with your arms up in the air, he never fired, right?
Correct.
It wasn't until you pointed your gun at him, advanced on him, with your gun, now your hands down, pointed at him, that he fired, right?
Correct.
So those were the two eyewitnesses that the prosecution brought out, and they both torpedoed the prosecution's case. The first one establishes that Rosenbaum was reaching for Kyle Rittenhouse's gun, which can reasonably by anyone be foreseen or be seen as a intent to kill him. The second one testified, and he was shot by Kyle Rittenhouse and survived, and he testified that Kyle Rittenhouse did not shoot him until after he had already raised his gun and pointed it at Kyle. That is extremely damning for the prosecution's case. So the prosecution rested their case, and it was in shambles. It was looking particularly bad for them. So their biggest chance now is to get Kyle Rittenhouse to order a code red, to admit that he ordered the code red, Colonel Jessup style. Let's see how that went down.
Take my gun from me, but he kept chasing me. It didn't stop him.
Mr. Rittenhouse, you're telling us that you felt like you were about to die, right?
Yes.
But when you point the gun at someone else, that's going to make them feel like they're about to die, right? That's what you wanted him to feel.
No.
You wanted him to get the message from you that if you come any closer, I'm going to kill you. That's why you pointed the gun at him, right?
I pointed the gun at him to deter him from... I pointed the gun at him so he would stop chasing me. That's why I pointed the gun at him.
Because if you point the gun at him, you were hoping he would stop chasing you because he would get the message from you that if he keeps coming, you're going to kill him. Right?
I didn't want to have to kill Mr. Rosenbaum.
That's not the question I asked.
It seems argumentative, Mr.
Did that even factor into your mind at that point? Did you even care whether you were going to kill him or not?
I didn't want to have to kill anybody. I was being attacked. That's why I shot him. Shot at him.
You shot at him with the intent of hitting him and killing him, correct?
I didn't want to kill anybody.
Then why are you shooting at someone with an AR-15 at close range if you don't want to kill him?
Because he's attacking me.
This line of questioning was brought to Kyle on all three instances against the three people that he shot. And it was risky to have him testify in his own defense, but I do believe that that risk paid off. As you can see, it does not look good for the prosecution. It looked actually really terrible. It looked like the type of interrogation where you're trying to torture someone into giving a false confession. That is how that felt watching. It was gut-wrenching and intense. But supposedly, I saw someone who was a court observer tweet that the jury was actually pretty disinterested. They weren't really taking notes, and they were leaned back and unengaged during much of the testimony, or the cross-examination, I should say, of Kyle Rittenhouse, because the prosecution was asking extremely repetitive questions. And I saw some people, some stupid people, on Twitter saying, you know, it's gun safety 101. You don't shoot at something you're not intending to kill. No, it's murder trial 101. You don't admit that you're intending to kill someone. Come on. You don't incriminate yourself in a murder trial. That's, you know, he was coached by his lawyers on what to say and what not to say. And it looks like he followed that coaching really well. I don't think, in my own opinion, that Kyle Rittenhouse caught on as quickly as to what the prosecution was trying to ask him, but I don't blame him for that. And it was very clear that they wanted him to basically say he wanted to kill somebody, and it gets sadder throughout the course of the trial. And I'm gonna roll one more clip, and then we're gonna talk about the rest of the surrounding issues of the trial.
Isn't one of the things people do in these video games try and kill everyone else with your guns?
Yeah, in the video game, it's just a video game. It's not real life.
On the merits of a homicide case, this trial is going so poorly for the prosecution, even after Kyle Rittenhouse, though risky, because he testified, his testimony is going to be admitted as evidence for the jury to examine for themselves and weigh. And, you know, he's the star witness for the defense, so I think this plays out pretty well for them, in my personal opinion. Again, I'm not an expert, but I have sat through 3 different portions of 3 different murder trials personally, but that's a different story. That doesn't give me a whole lot of expertise. I just know what I'm watching, and it looks really good for the defense at the present moment. And in fact, it looks so good for the defense that the prosecution seems to be trying to sabotage the trial. And in multiple instances, they have been severely, and I do not use that word lightly, they have been severely admonished by the judge in this case. I'm going to roll a few clips here just to provide some context. They wanted to introduce a picture of Kyle Rittenhouse at a bar post-arrest, post-release, and the judge had already said we're not admitting this as evidence because they're trying to basically associate him with Proud Boys. And so the prosecution's like, no, we're going to blur out the rest of it and just use the t-shirt as evidence for lack of remorse or whatever. And they wanted to introduce that for questioning. And the judge is letting them have it.
There have been numerous occasions during this trial where they've opened the door. The one time when they're going into Mr. Rosenbaum's the reason he doesn't like guns. And I said something, I whispered in Mr. Krause's ear, it's because of the prior convictions. Please stop. And he did. He knows if you're going to go into something that's been excluded in a pretrial order, you better ask the court, you better get permission. This is ridiculous.
It wasn't excluded, Your Honor.
You know why it was excluded in the first place? Because it was propensity evidence. That is exactly what 90404 is designed to prevent. You're talking about his attitudes. His attitude is he wants to shoot people. Now, I've admitted that kind of evidence in other trials when it's been appropriate. I didn't admit it in this case because, to me, what I've heard in this trial, and by the way, Mr. Richards absolutely correctly points out that just hours ago, I said I had heard nothing in this trial to change any of my rulings.
That was before
So
the
why?
defense testimony, Your Honor.
Pardon me?
That was before the
Don't
defense testimony.
get brazen with me. You knew very well. You know very well that an attorney can't go into these types of areas when the judge has already ruled without asking outside the presence of the jury to do so. So don't give me that. That's number one. Number two, this is propensity evidence. I said at the time that I made my ruling, and I'll repeat again now for you, I see no similarity between talking about wishing you had your AR gun, which you don't have, so that you could fire rounds at these thought to be shoplifters, and the incidents in these cases, which are not, there's nothing in your case that suggests the defendant was lying in wait to shoot at somebody or reflecting upon the shooting for a vast amount of time. Every one of the incidents involves matters that involve seconds in time. So I commented at the time, I don't see the similarity, and I don't see the similarity now. You have an incident where he's making comments about some alleged shoplifters versus crimes that involve instantaneous actions, whether premeditated murder or whether self-defense. That's for the jury to decide. But I don't see the similarity. I said it couldn't come in, and it isn't coming in, no matter what you think. Number two, I have to be concerned that with what Mr. Richards has said about the progress of the trial, and when you were I said you were over the line, close to or over the line on commenting on the defendant's pretrial silence, which is a well-known rule. I'm astonished that would have been an issue. So I don't want to have another issue as long as this case continues. Is that clear?
It is.
Thank you. Ask the jury to come back in, please.
Ultimately, the prosecution's shenanigans during the Kyle Rittenhouse testimony opens the door to a mistrial with prejudice based on the admonishments by the court and by the prosecution's impropriety during the testimony and their lines of questions. And the defense requested this, and I'm going to show you that clip.
The defense is going to be making a motion for a mistrial. However, that motion is going to be requested with prejudice. I'm aware that the court's aware that normally a defense motion for a mistrial does not preclude a retrial. I understand that. The second one says the prosecutor's actions was designed. An exception to this rule exists where a defendant's motion is necessitated by prosecutorial impropriety designed to avoid an acquittal. Now, what has happened in this morning was two times. The state had commented on Mr. Rittenhouse's right to remain silent. The first time he was admonished by the court. The second time the court had the jury leave and re-admonished him on that.
Among the mishandlings of this case by the prosecution is the fact that they do not understand basic facts about firearms. They were asking Kyle Rittenhouse about the deadliness of an AR-15 versus a handgun in such close range as when Kyle shot Grossrich. Everyone's screwing up that name in the court, so I don't want to hear it. So basically, and then he has a fetish when it comes to the distinction between hollow point and full metal jacket ammunition. So the prosecution doesn't understand guns. They don't understand the Second Amendment and how that's supposed to work. In fact, this is really a trial against the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is on trial with this case, and that is the key issue. That is why this case matters. They want to use this case to pretty much strip away the Second Amendment. I get that a murder trial really only affects Wisconsin. This specifically this murder trial, affects Wisconsin law and precedent. I understand that, but local issues have national precedence in the United States currently in our country. For instance, Loudoun County, Virginia isn't the only school system that they might be the national embarrassment, but it is not the only school system where those shenanigans are going on. That's the point that I'm trying to make. And with Kyle Rittenhouse, it's a trial on the Second Amendment, basically saying that he does not have the right to defend himself. That is irrelevant to whether he should have been there, whether he should have been armed. That is irrelevant because each charge is compartmentalized. You got to weigh the merits of each charge individually. You can't just say he's guilty of one, therefore guilty of all. That's not how this case is going to work. Anyone who knows how this trial will work knows that's not how it's going to work. That is just a straw man, or I don't even know if that's a straw man. That is just something stupid by low-wit leftist. Maybe they're mid-wit. I don't know. But yeah, that's not how the law works. So with that said, the Second Amendment is ultimately what's on trial with this case. They want a January 6th Kyle Rittenhouse. And what we're seeing now is that a bunch of conservative commentators, because let's not forget the Christian commentators largely threw Kyle Rittenhouse under the bus. Evangelical dark web, of course, did not. And the Gospel Coalition slandered him, put him on the same level as Dylan Roof, the South Carolina church shooter from several years ago at this point. They put him on that level. So with that said, many conservative commentators also did not want to stick their necks out for Kyle Rittenhouse. Just to name a few, particularly in the Second Amendment LARP crowd, Dana Lash. Definitely one of them. We saw companies that branded themselves as conservative, like Black Rifle Coffee Company, basically take a giant dump on Kyle Rittenhouse and make fun of him, and otherwise just expose how much they're just a grift. So we are seeing a bunch of conservatives basically, they don't want to stick their nose out for their own when their own is in trouble with the law, whether righteous or gray area. Like January 6th. And, January 6th was used by the left to basically label anyone who supports Trump, who supports election integrity, as a domestic terrorist. That was basically the line of thinking that the whole propaganda surrounding January 6th is supposed to lead. That's why it led to the National School Board Association writing a letter recommending that the Department of Justice and I guess Homeland Security treat angry parents at school board meetings as domestic terrorists, because that is the precedent that's being set in our country. It might be a local issue, but it has national precedent, and that's what we need to watch out for. If Kyle Rittenhouse is acquitted or mistrial with prejudice, which is perhaps even better, then the Second Amendment will stand, and we have precedent in Wisconsin, at least, and certainly around the country, because I don't believe that Kyle Rittenhouse would have been charged everywhere in the country. These are clearly Democrats that are hungry. This Binger guy, who's the prosecutor in the case, your little finger, he wants to be a celebrity within the Wisconsin Democrat Party. That's what it looks like, and that's why he's so frothing at the mouth in order to get a conviction. That is why his knowledge of guns is so lacking, and that's why his moral argument is you had a gun, therefore the other person should have been threatened. Your gun was bigger, because that's how gun safety works. So it's just nuts what this trial has become. It's a national embarrassment for our legal system, and this is what it looks like when someone who should not have been charged is having a trial. Now, fun story, I have witnessed an instance, a trial. This was in district court in Maryland, so it wasn't a big trial, but it was interesting because this was some white trash nonsense. I witnessed a white trash trial where the state was pretty much forced, because it was some sort of family dispute. the family was pressing charges against their parents or vice versa. I can't quite remember that detail on stolen property or property that was thrown out in the process of some sort of eviction. So it was some white trash stuff. And you could tell the prosecution knew this was a losing case. You could tell. And I believe it was the parents that were defendants, and they were acquitted. It was a bench trial, and they were acquitted. And this didn't have the evidence to go to trial, but it went to trial anyway because the accuser pressed charges. So that was the type of situation, and this is what this situation is. We can see all along the way that prejudice was executed against Kyle Rittenhouse from the police department and from the prosecution's office. The police department charged Kyle Rittenhouse very quickly on very limited evidence with murder. Or they recommended a criminal complaint, and then the prosecution charged him with murder. So, very limited evidence. Obviously, this would not have been done in everywhere else in the country, but Kenosha had some, political reasons, mostly leftism, to persecute Kyle Rittenhouse, and therefore also the Second Amendment. Kyle Rittenhouse is nothing special. He's a proxy for the Second Amendment. He's a proxy for anyone who does not want to be ransacked by left-wing paramilitary groups. That is who Kyle Rittenhouse is. It doesn't matter that he's 17. He's a military-age male. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he was out past curfew. Governments don't have the right to impose curfews. And it's certainly... To me, it doesn't matter that he was on the streets instead of just on the property. I don't care about those issues. Left-wing paramilitaries do not have the right to rule the streets. And we can't let that happen anywhere. And that is what this trial is about, when left-wing paramilitaries rule the streets and you have the audacity to fight back. They want to stomp you out. This is the Second Amendment on trial. So that's all I got to say about that. Do be in prayer for Kyle and his family. My name's Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. If you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel also. And don't forget to like the video, because that helps with YouTube algorithms greatly. And check out evangelicaldarkweb.org. A lot of good stuff there as well. Articles almost every day. And let me know what you think about what I think. I like the comments section. And have a blessed day. And I'll catch you on the next one.